Hello everyone. So in our last video we have discussed about the thermodynamic system and control volume, control mass system and open system, closed system and isolated system. In today's video we are going to discuss about the properties of the system. Okay? So property of a system is the characteristics of a system which can be defined. So that is the property of the system. So basically the properties of system is of two types. First one is intensive property, second one is extensive property. Okay, so the property which is independent of mass. Okay, so the property which is independent of mass, that is known as intensive property, or the property that is dependent on mass, which is known as extensive property. Okay, for example, if we are talking about the intensive property, so the intensive properties are like volume. Volume? No, volume is extensive property. Okay, and other than that, if we are talking about the pressure, if we are talking about the temperature, so these are the intensive property. So if we are once again we are taking into the consideration this thing, like what are the intensive property, what are the extensive property. Yeah, so density and viscosity, it is the intensive property. And if we are talking about the extensive property, as I already told you, that volume is extensive property. Other than this, if we are talking about the enthalpy, entropy and other properties also, which are extensive property. But if we add something that is specific, if we are adding a specific to the in front, like as a prefix, so if we are talking about the specific volume, so it is intensive property. If we are talking about a specific volume, okay, we have already talked about that. Specific entropy, specific enthalpy, so these are the intensive property. Okay, once again I will be reminding you so that you don't get confused. Okay, intensive property, the property which is independent of mass. Okay, so if we are talking about the example, so example is firstly pressure, second temperature and density, viscosity, etc. If we are talking about the extensive property, so extensive property are those properties which are independent, which are not independent of mass. These are extensive property. For example, volume, entropy, enthalpy and etc. Okay, so thank you. Hopefully you get to know about the intensive and extensive property. Okay, I will try to explain this thing by an example. Okay, so I would just like to say this thing. Say, like, if your mother is making curry for you, so she comes to you and said that what is the taste of this curry. uh, Whether he says instead of this, like, how is the salt in it, like it's good, it's not in the much quantity. So you can identify by tasting a little bit amount of that. Okay, so you need not to check whole the curry, like, because it's a homogeneous system. So you just need to test a slight sample of that curry so you can identify. But if your mother asks, is it sufficient for the 50 people or 10 people or 5 people? So you can't tell exactly because it's dependent on the mass. Okay, so the property which is independent of mass, these are the intensive property and extensive property, those are dependent on the mass. So if you ask a question like how much, so it's a extensive property, and that's it.